there's a keyword here you might want to know about. Let's say in this example that you have a div tag and you've specified its foreground color to be red. You want the same exact color to be used for the border of that div. Especially if you're going to be repeating that same color throughout, you can now use the current color keyword. What that does is it refers to what the primary color is for that particular definition, and therefore if you need to make any changes, you would only need to make that change in one place. All the rest will follow suit. You could say that current color to some extent is the closest thing we have to a variable. It kind of refers to whatever the primary is, and whatever that's set to, everything else falls in line. Let's see some colors in action. We'll return now to the CSS3 demos website. As I return over to Visual Studio in the project, I've expanded my colors area in my style sheet in a comment area to help me appreciate that the hex colors that were provided to me by the quote-unquote designer, I now have the RGB and HSL equivalents in the event that I want to use either one of those methodologies in my CSS for colors. Now I'm going to give you an example of one right now. We just made it possible in the nav area for the color to be transparent. What I want to do now is change that to prove a point and to discuss something to no longer be transparent, but to be RGBA of 0, 0, 0, 0. I'm going to save that, return over to the website, and I'll make sure it's refreshed. And you could still see that it's working just the way we had it prior to making that change. So why make the change? The change is here for this reason. It's been my personal experience that that transparent keyword is not supported in as many browsers as this syntax. So my personal recommendation, if you want to make something transparent, use this RGBA technique instead of the transparent keyword. Maybe after time, that transparent keyword will be supported everywhere. I'm going to return to the site, and I'm in the contact section area. And I think another example for where we can use some of this is in the contact form. I want to make it possible that if someone puts in wrong data, maybe I can use this new color scheme approach in here to really make a point with regard to if something is not good, especially if we're inside and we're putting something wrong in there. I'd really like that to stand out more. So what can I do? I'll go ahead and switch back over to Visual Studio, and I'm going to call upon the invalid selector, and I'm going to say not only that, but if you are in focus mode and you're invalid, what do I want to do? I'm going to change the background color to RGBA, use a number that was in my approved list, and I'm going to provide this for the opacity, which is going to make it at about 22%. Let's see what effect that has when something is invalid. I'm going to save that, return here, and refresh. You see how when we're focused in now, and the reason why it's doing that is because both of these are required fields. If I try to submit, well, it was invalid by merit of having nothing in there. Well, if I put something in here like Michael Palermo, and now as I toggle back and forth, you'll notice I'm not going to get that slightly different looking color in the background, and the reason for that is because this is valid data now. If I put bad data in here and continue to go back, it's going to kind of give me this indication like, guess what? Don't think that's right. So I'm going to go back over into Visual Studio. I'm going to add a new color here for title. So the color is going to be using HSLA 210 100%, 10%, that's in terms of lighting, and a 0.75 or 75% for the opacity. So as a reminder, with HSLA, this is the hue, 210, this is the saturation, this is the lighting, and again, 75% for opacity. Let's see how that's going to make the page look now. I'll go back over to the browser, and I'm going to click refresh. So I've added a different color here for the top, something that's going to stand out now from the rest of the page. Well, now we're going to give our attention to gradients. This is definitely the eye candy of this module. Here we get to blend some colors together and provide that ooh-ah factor. So let's take a look at it from this perspective. Let's say we want to create a class called Groovy, and we want to mix some colors together. In simplicity, we can set the background to a linear gradient and blend those two different colors together. Now, the first thing I'm going to mention is that you should probably always have at the beginning a background color specified that would serve as a fallback in the event that the browser doesn't support a linear gradient. Of course, depending on the browser, you may have to add specific types of definitions using those vendor prefixes. We talked about vendor prefixes in a previous module, and although I don't use them in every single one of the examples, in this one I thought I should because there are some minor differences in the syntax. So let's go ahead and see how we can apply this in a big way at the CSS3 Demos website. I'm back in Visual Studio. I want to make a big change to this page visually. So I want to reference the body tag. I want to now set its background to be one of these gradients. And just like that, wow, I've got myself a gradient that's specified. Now I'm going to add the next kind. And just like that, I have another linear gradient specified. Again, now you'll see the keyword is part of the definition as opposed to being a value inside of it. But they both accomplish the same thing. They're going to have this color here, the 00AAAA, at 70% of the gradient, and the darker color is going to be at 30%. Let's see how this looks when we apply it now to the site. I'm going to click refresh. And now the background is starting to make the content come out and stand out more. Gradients, if used appropriately, can really provide a nice visual appeal to the end users of your site. Now I'm going to add another gradient. Entire purpose for this one is just to provide a reference for you so that you can see what it would look like if you really want to target as many browsers as possible. Now there is a class name that's used in the HTML, and if I scroll down you'll be able to see where it is. It's in the section of contact. It's class equals grad. The reason why I have that there is because I knew eventually I was going to apply a gradient to this section, and that's what I'm going to do now. And it's not going to be typed out, but I am going to explain what's going on here so that you can appreciate how you'd really want to do this if you're going to target as many browsers as possible. First of all, you'll notice I set the background to a white color. This is my fallback. Then I'm going to try to apply a filter. At the end here, I specify I'm trying to go after IE6 and IE7. The next one, IE8. The next one, WebKit. Next one, IE10, or future CSS3 browsers without any prefix whatsoever. So I wanted you to see this. I didn't involve some of the other vendor prefixes, but this is a good understanding of if I really want to go after the depth of browsers that are out there, this is what you'd have to do. So it's more of a reference than anything. But just to prove that the reference is worthwhile, I'll go ahead and save that, and I'm going to return to our site. And let's go ahead and go over to the contact page, and I'm going to hit the key to refresh the browser, and you can now see that I do have kind of a reversal of that color now as a gradient for the contact page specifically. In summary, we learned there's a lot about colors. We learned how to set the opacity and transparency using opacity and transparent keywords. Try to understand our color options. There's some predefined color names, such as current color, and we know the hex values, but we also saw how to convert that hex value into an RGB. RGBA and HSLA are just other means or methods to drawing out the color that we want. If it's easier for you to find a color by its hue, by its saturation, and by its lighting, then you would use HSLA. If you think in terms of RGB and you understand the 0 to 255 for each one of those, then you would use RGB. Of course, the A refers to the opacity. And then finally, we learned how to create gradients, and we saw an example of that by applying it to the body of our site. And we also created a little gradient inside the contact page. So I hope you enjoyed learning all this about colors, and this concludes this module on colors in our CSS3 course.